Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining the fourth week of COM350. This is September 16th, and we're continuing on with the chapter in the book Computer Mediated Communications. Now, I wanted to do something, and I kind of did this last week. There's all kinds of interesting current events that I think are pretty relevant to this class. And I wanted to share those with you to give it, the class a little perspective of, what you might be learning as a result of the book and how it might pertain to stuff happening in current events. So what I wanted to do was start off with something that I saw on TikTok that I thought was pretty interesting, and it had to do with the Charlie Kirk assassination that took place last week. In fact, from a timing standpoint, I know we had it took place last week, I think on a Wednesday, and then on Thursday we had James do the talk, and it was probably too soon to really talk about it because it was pretty raw. I don't know if any of you saw the video, but the video went viral of the actual shooting, and that was pretty graphic, and I didn't want to subject you guys to that. But that's another, that is another example of stuff that is perpetuated or catching sort of a viral wave on the internet. And given the week has gone by, and there's like a multitude of things that are being considered and talked about and hypothesized in terms of who did what, and sometimes there's some interesting observations, and I credit TikTok and I guess the algorithm that ultimately presents it in my page, right, on my For You page. So as I go through some of these, I find it kind of like very interesting, and I wanted to share this particular TikTok with you, and it's about 8 minutes, so you guys can sit back and check it out. But I wanted to show this to you, and then as we go through the chapter, there's some connections that you can make from what the chapter talks about and what's actually happening kind of in real life. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. So this is I've kind of like watched this woman and her analysis several times, and I thought it was pretty good. So I wanted to share that with you. Now let's see. Let me see if I can find the where'd that page go? Hold on. I got too many tabs open up here. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay, can you guys see that? And it just says jump on in. Okay, I'm gonna start playing it, and then let me know if you can catch the audio. Okay.
Jump on that might help folks who aren't plugged into the far corners of the internet make better sense of the motivations and actions of two major right-wing groups that are involved in. If you're looking at a swirl of cryptic memes and trying to reverse engineer a motive, you're going to misread this story. What looks like politics is often subculture. What looks like a manifesto is sometimes a dare wrapped in a joke, wrapped in a void. Two families on the right keep getting mashed together in coverage. There's some mainline far-right Christian nationalism, Groyper sees, especially its black-pilled accelerationist. They overlap in rhetoric and enemies that they don't want the same future, and they don't use the internet in the same way. Groyper's refers to a youth-driven online far-right scene that's associated with the America First brand led by Nick Fuentes. Black pill comes from incel forums called fatalism. No improvement in humanity is possible, thereby despair is rational. Acceleration in the extremist context means stoking crises to hasten societal collapse. You think of this as builders versus burners. So for Christian nationalism in its hard right form, it's still builder energy. It insists that the nation is or should be explicitly Christian, prizes hierarchy, order, and a return to rightful social roles. But the strategy is institutional. They want to win elections, they want to pass laws, they want to staff the courts and capture the school boards and rechristen the public square. You hear vocabulary about restoration and revival and sovereignty and virtue. This imagined endpoint is a moral order enforced by the state. Even when their rhetoric gets apocalyptic, the plan is still state power. The Groyper world orbits a completely different sun. It's youth-heavy, it's a coalition that includes a lot of streamers and online personalities, and it borrows from incel forums, gamer chat, crypto cynicism, edgelord comedy, and a lot of terminally online irony. Here's the core distinction. The black-pilled wing does not believe in reform, not of institutions, not of culture, not of people. The black pill is the conviction that decline is irreversible. If nothing can be redeemed, then the only creative act is negation. That's where accelerationism comes. In this context, acceleration means pressing on every social fault line, race, gender, religion, class, until something breaks. It is not policy, it's physics. The expectation is collapse, followed by nothing. Unlike some white supremacist or apocalyptic Christian variants that at least fantasize about what comes after, mainstream black pill content rarely sketches a constructive post-collapse order. It's entropy worship. Read the unraveling and enjoy the spectacle. Quick detour so that we don't mix wires here. Black-pilled accelerationism is not the same thing as tech bro AI accelerationism. The latter is a futurist, albeit doomy face, about speeding technological progress even at humanity's expense. Black pill is a social political fatalism that invites breakdown. Different crowds, different goals. Also distinct from more formal Christian nationalist projects. The language sometimes rhymes, both talk about decay, but Christian nationalists think institutions can be repurposed. Black-pilled Groypers think the institutions are rot. So why the memes that look like riddles? Because the memification is the ideology. Style is the substance, or as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. The meme factory does 3 jobs at once. 1, it allows for recruitment at scale. So high contrast, darkly funny, and deliberately absurd images travel farther than policy papers. Kids who would never sit through a speech will swallow 100 images that say more, faster, and sneakier. Number 2, plausible deniability. Irony is a Kevlar vest. It literally, they were just joking. It's the reference to reveal you're out of the club. The ambiguity is the shibboleth. And desensitization, number 3. Shock is used like a gym routine. The first time you see it, you flinch. 10th time, you smirk. By the 100th time, a position that once looked unthinkable has been normalized inside the in-group. That's why the aesthetics feel like a mashup of cartoon frogs and Wojaks and glitch art and millenarian doom and consumer culture parody. The mix says, nothing matters, everything's a joke, nihilism is the punchline. Who gravitates to black pill spaces? It's often younger men who feel exiled from status games that they think they can't win, like dating, elite colleges, prestige jobs, coherent communities. It's cheap status. Attention is the currency, and it bonds people who may never meet offline. That helps explain the why behind cryptic inscriptions or symbol-laden posts around real-world incidents. From the outside, we assume conventional motives. Ideology leads to a plan, leads to an act. Inside Black Pill world, the act is also a content drop. It's performance for an audience that reads the references, a proof of membership to people you only know by handle. Decoding the references isn't about uncovering a coherent program. It's about recognizing an identity and a dare. Don't confuse the absence of a blueprint with harmlessness, however. Politics of negation can still inspire catastrophic acts because the metric isn't does it build, but does it break? This is why For the Lulz can be both a smirk and a sincerely held view that only destruction has meaning. However, not every meme holds the same ideology, so the same image can be repurposed by different factions. What matters is the cluster: fatalism, edgelord irony, collapse talk, and status seeking through shock. When analysts try to read an incident through the old left-right script, they're going to miss the performance layer. If the actor is steeped in Black Pill culture, the motive vector points as much toward in-group status and mimetic spectacle as it does toward any policy aim. That doesn't excuse anything. It just changes the explanatory frame. You're not parsing a legislative program. You're reading an attempt to turn reality into a toxic in-joke. Last piece, why the Black Pill is sticky. It packages three things people crave when they feel powerless: certainty, community, and a role. Certainty says the game is rigged and doomed. Community says we are the ones who get the joke. And a role says speed the ending. It is a toxic story. It's also tidy, and it's available 24/7 on your phone. The antidote is not to romanticize institutions that have failed people. It's to refuse the seduction of entropy as identity. Call the Black Pill what it is: permission structure for cruelty, wearing the mask of sophistication. Then do the unglamorous work of making meaning and belonging where spectacle can't speak. That is the difference in one line. Christian nationalism is a plan to rule. Black-pilled accelerationism is a plan to ruin. Keep that polarity in mind. The memes stop looking like mysterious runes and start reading like what they are: billboards for a politics of nothing. I have a corollary essay up in the Orange Place on kitsch and its role in mainline right-wing Christian nationalism if you're so inclined, but otherwise I will.
I wish I never responded to all those texts. It would be better if we had just never met.
I wonder, did I catch that before it went to that weird video afterwards? I hope so. But I did want to share that kind of analysis of what she did so well at explaining. She did it much better than I could explain, between the Christian nationalists and the Groyper scene. And it really kind of talks to what your generation, and I'm not saying you all are, but probably much more aware of it than some of us in the older generation. And there are these subgroups that are really addressing these fringe kind of factions. Now, if you want to, let's see, if you want to check out, let's see, where is it? If you want to check out Sai's Substack, and she refers to Substack as, that, I don't know, that Orange Place. You can find her Substack there, and I think it's an interesting place to check out. The thing that I would suggest, and I assume that many of you are already on TikTok, you can find her, Sai Cantarell. She's got some really great analysis. I do want to also, a couple things. First off is point out that, she referred to medium is the message, which was something that Stacey Aldrich brought up, and it's true. It's like all of these tools that we're talking about, they are the medium, and depending on which subgroup, subculture you are in, it'll have different sort of uses and meanings, and it offers, you know, the environment for these sort of subcultures to develop and create sort of this environment for community. Okay, so I wanted to share that with you. I did find the PDF of Medium is the Message. So if anybody wants to download that and read it, it is posted in the resources, week 3 resources. So you might want to check that out. Any feedback, any questions about, you know, the TikTok that I just shared and what you folks might think about some of the current events that are taking place and some of the subcultures that might exist on the internet? Don't be shy. Okay, well, seeing none, I hope that that was educational. I found that very captivating. Okay, so with that, let's kind of jump into the chapter. And I wanted to kind of, again, give you that perspective of what's actually happening out there. And then maybe it'll provide some relevance or connection to some of the topics that you know, we'll cover in this chapter. So let me go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so we're going to be, let's see, talking about chapter 3, media synchronicity, and what does this all kind of contain? Okay, so 2 things that they want to point out, you know, conveyance and convergence. Conveyance is conveying a particular idea and then or message, and convergence is the audience converging on what it is that the message really is saying. And again, in the context of you know, what the size video was about in terms of black pill and Christian nationalism, you start to think about, okay, so conveying and converging, and that's kind of what happens when the message is taken upon itself to actually take action upon. So that's kind of the interesting subculture that's happening out there. Conveyance, transmission of information, convergence, the common understanding. It builds upon the couple of things that we talked about in the first 2 chapters, you know, media richness and media naturalness. And then conveyance is the transmission, and how does that result in understanding what that message is. And then the convergence, the naturalness, the schema. The convergence is really kind of a human characteristic of taking on some of this information and then making sense of it, and shifts attention to the communication process. So here's just a diagram of what, you know, what this all kind of means. You got the whole general area of computer mediated communications, and you have the convergence of the meaning, and you have the conveyance of the information. So synchronicity, you know, happening at the same time, right? So it's a coordinated communication. There's a common focus. I mean, we can talk about the various tools, like, you know, Zoom as an example is synchronous communication. I mean, I'm talking, and you guys can chime in if you want to. So, and it's happening at the same sort of time and space. It provides a common focus and facilitates a meaning convergence. So in this example, we're talking about, this chapter and conveying the information about what synchronicity is. Communicate synchronously, but process information asynchronously. So, you guys receive this, whether whether it gets absorbed or not. You can go back to the content resources and read up about it. So, that it's an asynchronous process because you can take in information whenever you want to. But the idea that we all meet here, at 12 o'clock, that's sort of the synchronous part of it. These 5 sort of media capabilities, they include like interacting with synchronicity. You got the information conveyance. You got the meaning convergence. So these are some of the key media capabilities. You got transmission velocity, and that's the speed at which the information is passed. And for the most part, as I speak, it's getting to you pretty instantaneously. And if you compare it to other kinds of mediums, you might take a little longer for email. You got text, you got other forms of let's say it could be a voice call or a written kind of communication. It takes the transmission velocity is different. Parallelism, that is, in my talking to you, I'm transmitting via audio. You're also seeing my image. You may see some body language. Those are all sort of parallel information streams. So it's not just one, kind of information stream. There's multiple streams, and that's parallelism. Symbol sets. So symbol sets, that's kind of interesting, right? And given the current events, it's pretty funny when the governor of Utah talked about the writings on the shell casings and referred to the OWO something. I forget what he said, but he kind of tried to pronounce it, and then that basically is a symbol, right? It's like a. I think the one with the UWU is more the common symbol, which is like kind of like a cat face that's got their eyelids closed, and the W is like the little nose, so that's like a closed-eyed cat face, and then the one with the eyes open, wide open, OWO is kind of like the eyes wide open, and that's an example of symbol sets. I mean, and there's all kinds of symbols. You can look at the ASCII symbols. You can look at some of these other memes, that are being referred to, like the Groiper scene. That there's a lot of memes, and a lot of those memes are conveyed through symbol sets. This idea of rehearsability. Email is an example of a medium that you can actually have the ability for rehearsability, right? You might get an email and it evokes some sort of emotional response or reaction. You might feel agitated, or you might feel happy, and you might write something quickly. And when you do that, you sometimes it's good to probably sit back and read it again and determine whether that's something that you really want to press send on. And so you can go back and edit it. That's the ability for rehearsability. And so things like email, you can go back and kind of edit your work before you actually hit the send. On a Zoom call like this, a good example was it's less time to rehearsability, because whatever I say is going to get transmitted. I remember on the first week when we had some technical difficulties, that was unavoidable. It was not conducive to hitting stop and going back and restarting again. So it's not a good environment for the rehearsability. Now, if you were doing a video and you wanted to post it up on TikTok, you could actually shoot the video, and if you liked it, you can post it. If you didn't like it, you could do it again. The way that I sort of talked about the comparison of these two competing subgroups, subcultures, I thought she did a great job, and I'm sure there was some editing involved, but I couldn't really tell that there was a lot of edited pieces through her talk that were then spliced together. She looked like she was talking pretty extemporaneously. I mean, there might have been some notes that she was reading from, but it certainly did not look like it was a prepared talk that she was actually speaking from. So anyway, that's kind of what rehearsability is. Does the medium enable you to rehearse what it is that you're trying to convey before actually conveying it? And then processability, things like email, things like video, things like my ability to kind of record this and post it. It gives it a continued life. It's something that you can go back and refer to. So it's reprocessability. So you can reprocess it, as opposed to, I guess one example is if we were to meet face to face and we were to chat about something, and that meeting was perhaps a chance meeting. If you remember what it is that we talked about, then that's probably pretty much all you can go with. There's no recreating that particular chance face-to-face meeting. So the reprocessability is pretty limited. But if you were to, let's say, go back and wanted to listen to James Buckeley's talk, you could do that. You could go back to the content and pull that back up and review it. So that's the reprocessability. And it's just a graphic description of what I just talked about. You got the meaning convergence, you got the information conveyance. These things on the left-hand side are all ways that information is conveyed, and ultimately, this is all under the kind of umbrella of computer-mediated communications. So again, another kind of a chart breakdown of these five media capabilities. Transmission velocity, how immediate is it when I say something and it's conveyed to you. You got the parallelism, simultaneous transmissions of a variety of different information formats, whether it's audio, visual, what have you, smell. You got symbol sets, and again, in the example that we started the class off, there's a multitude of symbols, and all the memes that are out there are reflected in some of the symbols, that speak to those memes. You got rehearsability, and you got reprocessability. So appropriation, what's the appropriate use of media? And I think at the end of the day, I mean, all of these things that we are able to access, they all will be used in some manner. There's not one particular tool that's necessarily better than the other. And as time goes on, I think, all of you will use a multitude of these particular tools. So whatever is appropriate, to convey whatever message and goal that you might have. Successful appropriation, the likelihood, increased likelihood of future appropriation, basically is the tool that you're using getting what you want to get across to the audience that you're trying to communicate to. And then it decreases cognitive effort. So, if it's kind of cryptic, what's interesting, I think, in the example that we started off with is a lot of that is probably pretty cryptic to a particular generation. And it may be ways that, a particular generation can communicate and form community around. And the demonstration of how the traditional media is trying to wrap their head around some of these subcultures, is really interesting to watch, because the cognitive effort for traditional media, whether it's like, the evening news, they're not gonna convey any of this stuff. That's why, at least for me, I get a lot of insight into stuff that's going on through some of these short videos on TikTok, because you're definitely not going to see that on any kind of mainstream news. And when you start to think about it, how do you all consume all this stuff that's happening? I'm assuming that since you all are part of this communication curriculum, communications is of interest to you, and that in any, course of events, there's like a multitude of things that you could consume to figure out like what is going on. And whether you're reading about it or watching, television news about it, or going online and finding out information, you got a lot of choices and a lot of avenues to explore, and even potential bunny trails that you might end up going down. But it's a heck of a lot of stuff. And this day and age, and given this administration, there's no lack of stuff that you need to pay attention to. But at the same time, all this information and media overload can easily result in sort of fatigue. So I would just say that you have to manage your time in such a fashion that you don't, make yourself go crazy. So, communications context, appropriation of capabilities within context. You got participants, and I look at whatever community group consists of that participant pool. Are they experienced with the medium? Is whatever medium you're using getting to them? Sometimes, in the work that I do, it might be that we need to reach out to, let's say, kupuna. And the question always becomes, if you're pushing it out via social media or email, are they really equipped, to receive that message? So you have to be able to, change the platform accordingly. are these participants engaged in routine communication tasks? Are they comfortable with using, whatever platform is delivering your message? And you may think you're comfortable with the message, but they may not be. So are they familiar with it and each other? Convey information, converge on the meeting, medium, the task, the function. So these are all kind of things to think about in terms of how the message is crafted and how the message is then conveyed. And again, it seems sort of sterile when you look at it from just a bunch of PowerPoint slides and the chapter. But if you think about it in the context of stuff that's happening, in the real world, and the various groups and communities that are developed for better or for worse, it's a pretty rich environment. And a communication context affects the appropriation. Again, just another sort of graphic to describe how some of these things kind of work in relations to conveying, any kind of message as it gets across to from you as a person delivering a message to the people in the audience that are receiving it. So this is kind of getting into some of the applications of media synchronicity, and basically in this section, they kind of compare business versus personal texting, and there's some kind of different expectations, I guess, if you're doing a business versus a personal text. So business text, you might get text from your colleague or your boss. The natural tendency is that you would respond pretty quickly because it's maybe it's tied to your job, maybe it's tied to your performance, maybe it's tied to some evaluation of what you're doing. And then you got the personal, right? Personal, maybe it's someone that's romantically connected with you and you want to respond quickly. Maybe it's somebody that you don't really feel that you need to respond quickly. So, the response time could be variable depending on, who that person is. In the business context, chances are, you kind of want to resolve it rather quickly. I mean, for me at least, I want to get things off of my plate. The quicker, the better. Reprocessing, review for response is important. The personal, you have this sort of reprocessability increases the intimacy. That means, if there's a romantic letter or email, that sort of, you can always kind of look back at it, read it, view it, sort of recreate or reinforce sort of the intimacy if, that is the message that's being conveyed. And then, in both personal and business, there could be kind of this increased fatigue if you get kind of overloaded with too much of this information overload. Rehearsability, revising the example that we talked about, if you're crafting a business response, you may want to take a look at it, read it through. It might require some spell checking. There may be some grammatical stuff that needs to be looked at. So there's that rehearsability. But in the personal text, tend to be pretty spontaneous, generated pretty quickly. And then the errors that might occur, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, you're quickly typing something out with your thumbs and, misspellings occur, and you hit send anyway. Errors, those errors tend to be forgiven, much more so in a personal text than if it were taking place in a business communication. The tendency is that if it's in a business communication, there's an expectation that you did proofread your stuff and that some time was given to better crafting a sentence or better looking for misspelt words and stuff like that. So those are some sort of the expectations in those different environments. So, in this particular example, you got romantic versus utilitarian. The utilitarian might be just matter of fact, kind of get something done. Romantic, there may be, more sort of nuance in the communications. You got, positive, emotional. Voicemails might be less emotional, but again, the intent is still there. I think the point is that there may be more frequent use of the words in an email to evoke sort of this positive emotional feeling. In romantic voicemails, I mean, it's another effort to try to convey maybe some romance, especially if you're leaving it on a voicemail. So anyway, interaction communications task, the romantic email more positive than voice, utilitarian email less emotion than a voice message. So kind of concluding the I'm just kind of reinforcing the comparison between romantic and utilitarian. Conclusion is that you adapt the language to compensate, in a romantic email. Voice message, vocal cues, email, the email lacks some of those vocal kinds of medium conveyance. You got more cognitive effort for an email communications. Now, again, this is just an example of what the author is making some comparison to. I think, there's a multitude of other examples, especially given in light of, some of the ways that some of the subcultures keep each other engaged, in that subculture. This was kind of just an analysis of how some of the communication mediums are used in the sort of the event of a disaster, and I've been involved with something called the virtual operating support team, and our it's called the BOSS, and this BOSS is there to help sort of civil defense kind of look at social media. This was actually done probably a good 10 years ago. They have other tools that they use now, but at a time when it was kind of beneficial to kind of crowdsource some of this information by having people be part of this BOSS team, virtual operating support team, to monitor social media to see what was happening, especially in the context of like a like a hurricane. And so in the disaster phases, you got preparedness. That's the pre-disaster. Then you got a response, and response typically is during the disaster. So like in a hurricane, you have the hurricane approaching, and we had one Kiko that was coming. So that's the whole preparedness, right? Getting ready, paying attention to the media and the projections. Now, if the if the hurricane were to actually land, and that's called landfall, then it goes into a whole nother mode of response. So part of the function of this VOS group would start to monitor what are some of the social media things that are being posted to get a sense as to what's happening, in the field. And the whole purpose of that was this group would help monitor so that the response teams like civil defense could look at relying on some of this crowdsourced and being a part of the VOS, you were already kind of vetted to be a trusted source, in terms of looking at what's going on out there. So that was a thing that we used to do when a hurricane would land, and then we would activate, the team. And then in the recovery mode is, what happens after the hurricane has passed, and now you're in a recovery mode. So that's another function. And all I'll say to this is that, we were brought in to help during the preparedness and the response. But then once it hits the recovery phase, it's hard to expect a lot of volunteers to continue to support on a recovery if everybody is needing to recover, their own kind of situation. So I think less engagement depending on how supported you are to participate in the recovery mode. And then, preparedness, recovery, there's this, the whole sort of category of risk communication, and then response is more crisis communication. Convenient for communicating during disasters, different communication for risks and crisis. And, basically the response and the recovery mode. But again, when natural disasters occur, whether it's, like could be lava, could be hurricanes, social media is a good thing to monitor, given the fact that, the community is contributing to it. It's just key to make sure that these teams that are helping out are part of a vetted, sort of trusted resource. And just, a little bit more sort of detail. You got, during a crisis mode, you got accurate, detailed, specific, timely information. Again, it's all kind of dependent on trusted sources. The communication tends to be fewer words, and oftentimes will refer to other resources via hashtags. So the strategy is to minimize cognitive processing effort. You don't spend a whole lot of time trying to interpret what the message is. You want to keep it short, keep it directed, and make sure that it's actionable. And then you're able to reshare relevant, important information. And that's what, in the days of Twitter, which I tend not to be as much a part of anymore because of Elon Musk, but there was a whole time when resharing was important, just to get the message out to your followers or your network. And that was kind of the act of retweeting. So retweet network, primary source of information. The risk, retweet information to prepare or recover. You got a crisis. This is like during the risk mode. You got the crisis mode. Retweeting, use of fewer words, interpretable hashtags. Keep it short, specific, retweet faster, kind of make it pretty direct and actionable. Adapt from risk to crisis to risk to crisis to risk communication. So, risk is a phase, crisis is another phase. And this is just, again, kind of more of a author's analysis of media synchronicity. The capability of the media should focus on the participant uses. So when I talk about, the media capabilities, whether it's Zoom or Facebook or social media or, email, it should focus on the participants' uses. Media capabilities center on the technology. You got the conveyance of the message, convergence of the information, convergence of the message should not be separated. The communication of networks, groups, communities. Again, there's such a multitude of these networks, groups, and communities. You can spend a lot of time just analyzing any kind of interesting subgroup. And again, going back to the TikTok video that we started off with, it's to me, I found it pretty fascinating that you could have these subgroups that are pretty divergent from what I typically would encounter on any given day. Yeah, and it just goes to show that realities of people and communities could be vastly different depending on what the circumstances are, that might have contributed or continue to, foster those kinds of environments. You got multiple influences that impact, how these communities stay together. And then it's often interesting to analyze, these collaboration patterns. And again, I go back to the video, and if you were to go watch the video again, you'll see how, in these subgroups, how collaboration patterns might appear, and how, the information is conveyed, and then the convergence, of the actual message that results in some action. And anyway, I thought it was, quite fascinating. And again, just a diagram of, you have these multiple influences on the computer mediated communications in the middle. You have on the right and left hand side, media richness and media naturalness, what we talked about in the first two chapters, and then, this chapter on media synchronicity, all coming together to really determine, the constraints on the media, the personal sort of cognitive schema, your ability to understand like what's going on, and the context of all that communication. So that's pretty much this particular chapter on synchronicity. But I thought it's important to talk about it, but also understand all of this in the context of some of the things that you might encounter, in everyday occurrences or activities that are going on, in current events. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that people might have at this stage. Any questions, comments?
Maybe,
Yeah.
okay, sorry to ask the question, but, I'm just auditing the class. But for my information, there's a lot of information coming through. Do you trust every communication coming through, and how would you differentiate what is true and what is not, so that I can digest it and analyze it and make a decision myself? So That's the question.
Yeah. So it's sort of, that's a really good question. It's a function of how immersive you want to get into the different channels of information. So let's I'll use TikTok as an example. How do I determine whether I want to listen to somebody versus somebody else? Oftentimes I'll look at the user and the username, and one dead giveaway is if the user is using some name like user and there's a whole string of numbers and alphanumerics after it, I get the impression that it's not really a person. It's kind of like it could be a bot that's been programmed to convey a certain message. So I give it less credibility because I really can't identify who that person is. Now, in the case of this person, Cantarell, she puts herself out there. She has some other sites that she's referencing. She has a Substack. She has other video that she talks about and provides analysis. So, I've actually saw her on some other topic and I thought, oh, the response that she gave to a particular topic was quite insightful. And I thought, well, let me just follow her and then see what else she has to say. And then it popped up on my For You page, and she did the analysis of the Christian nationalists and the Groyper scene. And I thought the response was really well thought out and well developed. And so it was worth sharing with you all, right? So I thought it was a legitimate, well thought out site, a well thought out delivery. And I put a little bit more weight on her ability to convey her analysis. So what I'm saying is that you gotta watch some of these videos. You gotta look at who's delivering the video. You gotta make a determination whether you feel that you can actually trust the person by doing some research, going back and looking at the links, looking at what they've posted, so that you can build your sense of trust, and then go from there. Now, there's other topics that are kind of interesting that come up on my For You page. So every so often there's some paranormal stuff, and then right now there seems to be a lot of attention on this sort of extraterrestrial thing that's moving through the solar system called CI Atlas. And couple years ago there was another one that was moving through the solar system called Oumuamua. And Oumuamua was, UH was following it and trying to figure out where was it coming from. And this 3I Atlas, the 3I references, it being interstellar. So it's coming in from outside the solar system. And there's people that are aiming, their telescopes on it. And again, there's some that are questionable whether they're really conveying the right information, but there's others that are more trustworthy. So you have to listen to it. You have to look at who's transmitting this, how authentic, is the information that they're conveying. And then, you got to make your analysis based on your determination, whether you think it's worthy of your, worthy of your attention. And if that's a subject you're interested in, I would talk to you guys have a after lecture gathering. You should take a couple of those videos and test your group analysis on whether or not that's something worth following. But I would, I mean, if you're interested in this stellar stuff, I mean, you should Google 3I Atlas and see, you know, where that leads you. There's no lack of, you know, sort of interesting topics that captivate, you know, at least my interest. But again, I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out, like, you know, is 3I Atlas coming in from, I mean, they've concluded that it's not a comet, it's not an asteroid, and it almost looks like it has some form of self-propulsion, right? So, you know, I just gotta kind of like keep watching and see what else they might find out. But I find that kind of intriguing. So, like anything else, you gotta just, you know, follow the information crumbs, and, you know, see which ones seem reasonable to embrace, and others will naturally kind of like indicate some form of it being kind of misinformation. And if you really do, you know, kind of like pay attention, you'll figure out which ones those are, the ones that kind of like don't make sense or don't connect to the actual truth. I mean, even you know, all the discussion that's going on right now about the shooter and this guy, you know, Charlie Kirk. There's a whole bunch of conspiracy theories that, you know, the shooter wasn't the the guy on the roof. It might have been somebody else. Anyway, so, you know, you can't believe everything. I mean, I'm not saying that that's something that I'm following and believing, but you got to give yourself some time to figure out, like, how does this thing all kind of sort itself out. That's a long-winded answer to your question.
So it's the source that is providing that information, whether you can.
Yeah, you guys got to just, you know, listen to it, talk about it, you know, do analysis of it, and even for the rest of the class, you know, figure out what makes sense to you. And I mean, if you got something that you wanted to bring to the class next week, you know, we can take a look at it, and we can do a little bit of analysis of, you know, what do you think? You know, do you think this is for real? Should we pay attention to this or not?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I got a question.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah.
You know, along the same lines, you know, as I was listening to the TikTok video, almost at the beginning, I was sort of lost because maybe I'm just older, and maybe the younger ones could pick up on it, and I didn't fully understand her cryptic comments. Is there a suggestion as to how we can better learn about the source of those comments, or, you know?
Well, can you pick a comment that perplexed you?
Almost from the beginning, you know, just the whole topic, you know.
You know, I would love to replay it, and then we can go through it with a little bit more analysis. But I know, you know, the time is kind of running out for our class today. But
I'm just looking for suggestions.
Yeah, you know, a lot of what she said made sense to me because I'm familiar with 4chan, I'm familiar with Reddit, I'm familiar with some of the subcultures that exist, you know, on the fringes. Not that I'm a fringe person, but you know, part of my business is to kind of at least understand what is out there on the fringe. And this sort of idea of the, you know, the builder versus the burner, you know, when you talk about like anarchists, you know, anarchists just sort of want to see the established institutions basically destroyed. And that's what the black pill is all about. That's the black pill. And when they make references to the pill, it's, you know, like you watch the show Matrix, right? You got the red pill and the blue pill. Well, you know, this is sort of taking that meme a little further into the black pill. And then there's this whole subculture. And if you just look up like Groyper, you know, that's a whole nother meme that these subcultures sort of leverage. Now, I don't know how many of you guys watch South Park, but that's another place if you guys are interested in following some of the references. And even when I watched South Park, I didn't realize that one of the episodes actually had the guy Charlie Kirk represented. They didn't call him Charlie Kirk. He got went by another name, but they did make reference to it even before this assassination. So yeah, and this guy Nick Fuentes, I mean, that's a whole nother world that if you're not following, yeah, there's a whole lot of young people that are highly influenced. And if you looked at the audience that was at the Utah Valley, gathering, I mean, that's a college campus, and they must have had at least a couple 3,000 people, listening. So it was pretty dramatic, and again, I would leave it to the students in the class to speak for Gen X, but Gen X has their own language. They have their own forms of communication. They have their own circles of who they follow, who they talk about, who they communicate with. So, I'd love to have them share a little bit more about that. But yeah, Steve, we're in a different generation.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand their vernacular.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so next week Thursday, this coming Thursday is another speaker, and it'll be interesting. Might not be as interesting. The topic is going to be interesting, but I think Pokele was he did a really good job. But anyway, between now and Thursday, you guys all take care. Good to see you all. Aloha.
Thank you.
Thank you.